My hot take on office jobs: you need friends, not coworkers. Keep it simple. Let's dive into that. Welcome back to the Keeping Living Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow learner, Michael Klucas, and in this show, we boil down complex topics into simple, actionable tips. So let's start off with the first segment of the show, the setup. I believe we're probably asking too much of our jobs, and that covers a couple of things. So on Simon Sinek's show, A Bit of Optimism mentions in a couple of episodes how community has shifted over the years and has become more spread out. It sounds like a little bit of a jump, but trust me, I'll get to it. I'll connect it back. There has been this kind of shift in how we look at work, how we look at our jobs, and what that means for how we interact with people on our daily lives. So for a good example being, within the pandemic, there was a shift that occurred because of us going from in-office work as our standard and our norm to now office hybrid work and remote work becoming more of a player in the field of what is possible with a job and a career. And we come to use our jobs not only as a means of paying the bills and keeping food on the table and a roof over our heads, but there's been this shift to try to have our jobs meet not only our financial needs, but our fulfillment needs, our social needs, and our personal development needs. We're actually putting, I think, a lot of pressure on what our jobs can do for us. And granted, at some points, jobs can actually meet a lot of these criteria, but not all the time. So that's where we have a bit of an issue with jobs being asked too much and us not being able to find these other buckets or these other ways of meeting our needs outside of work. The reason I could bring this up is there's the idea of the loneliness endemic. So you simply Google this, like loneliness epidemic. So just going from this, we have results from like Department of Health, Human Services, New York Times, NPR, CNN, and just more. So I'll go full screen for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, and then for those of you who listen on a podcast app, I'll keep reading them out. So we have Department of Human Health Services. We have our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. NPR, America has a loneliness epidemic. Here are 6 steps to tackle this. Another, what is this one? So Department of Health and Human Services, new Surgeon General advisory raises alarms about the loneliness epidemic. CNN, the loneliness endemic. Nearly 1 in 4 adults feel lonely. New York Times, Surgeon General, we have become a lonely nation. That doesn't exactly bode well for us and community. And as I mentioned at the start of the show, I think you need coworkers, not friends. There is a bit of a disconnect happening here, because if we're becoming lonelier and lonelier as a nation and we're putting more and more burden on our jobs to kind of meet that need and fulfill that need, it's a bit of a catch-22, because there's been a lack of community that has developed due to the social isolation for the past couple of years, but also just a general trend of losing community and losing community spaces. And young professionals honestly really want and need community. We are social creatures. That's something that I've mentioned before, something you probably have heard either on other podcasts or just in general throughout your life. Humans are social creatures, and those of us in Gen Z and younger millennials, or just honestly anyone, needs community. And there's that level, as I mentioned in my last podcast episode, which you should go check it out, about social capital that we as Gen Z are looking for, and at the same time that we are hoping to have within our younger adult lives comes into play here. Because, like, we have companies that do virtue signaling. So they say, like, we're family, or, hey, I'm willing to do this for you. And the thing is, I call it virtue signaling because that's not always the case. And that's something that we're aware of. There's been points probably I think all of us can speak to in which the value for the company has been, yep, we're accountable, we're responsible, we care for you guys, and this is a family here. But then I'm going to use my example of retail. It's like, well, we're overworked. We aren't getting as competitive pay, but instead we're getting pizza parties, which sure, free food, that's great. But to some level, there has to be a change that takes place. You can't just say, oh, this is who we are, but then never do anything about it. It's not a good look, and it does not build community that we need and that we want. Because the pandemic, again, created that period of isolation, and we're still recovering from it. Like, we're still getting to this point where we're trying to figure out what's our new homeostasis, what's our new norm, how are we going to find community, how are we going to build community in a world that's, both digitally connected, but again, feels very, very lonely. It's not a good mix, and it's not an easy mix to navigate. And so we're looking to our jobs to kind of meet these needs. We're looking to our jobs to kind of help us get better at finding community, help us find people with like-minded interests or with like-minded goals. And that's a good place to start. Like, I'm not going to say that a job or a company is not a good way of meeting people, because it is. You will spend about 80,000 hours on average throughout your life at work. And in some cases, you will spend more time with your coworkers than you will your own family, which, granted, is also a little bit of a problem, but that's a discussion for another day. But I don't think we should hold our jobs to that high of a standard. I'll still give you guys my secret to like how we can make our jobs meet our needs a little bit better later on, but right now, we're still holding our jobs to a bit too high of a standard. Like, yes, I believe we should hold our companies accountable for the things that they say and the things that they do and say that they stand for. That is important. You don't want to be stuck somewhere that's just virtue signaling the entire time. But some are better than others at this, because some places truly do write the value set and then lead with their values, which is a very good thing to see. But then also, work is varied. So there's a lot more that we're putting on its shoulders than pretty much ever before. And we're going to explore that actually in this next segment here. So, conflicts and conversation. I'm pulling up an article from Deseret News called Gen Z Teens Lonelier or More Apt to Use Therapy and Less Likely to Do Drugs, which in of itself that's an interesting title. But it's because it kind of fits the narrative, but also goes against the narrative where everyone's like, yeah, Gen Z is, depressed and anxious. And most people in the past anyways would assume, okay, cool. That means they have coping strategies that are going to be unhealthy, like alcohol or substances. And there are coping strategies that are very unhealthy that we are using, and I am not going to deny that fact. But then also it's like, oh, we're more apt to use therapy and actually discuss some of these problems. So that's a win right there. But that's not the point I wanted to make this. So in the first part of conflict and conversations, I want to talk about the fact that we are struggling to find our communities. So according to the Deseret News article, if you, again, are listening to us on a podcast app and not watching us on YouTube. So while diving into this article, it starts off with just, when it comes to Gen Z kids, you can discard the old saw that kids will be kids. Similar across generations based on the age and maturity level, Gen Z is different. And I will say that the technology that we have and just the way that the world has kind of shaped up, that has been a major cause for the differences in our adolescence into our young adulthood lives. And if you ask adults in Gen Z about their teen years, you'll learn that compared to previous generations, more teens in Gen Z are likely to feel isolated. They're less likely to have significant others in their teen years, so boyfriends, girlfriends, partners. They didn't hang out with each other in person as much. And then with parents likely working full time, they didn't often have as many family meals together. Less likely to have attended religious services regularly. They consume less alcohol, drugs, tobacco, and other products, which, again, that's a good thing. I'm not necessarily complaining about that one. And they're less likely to have a part-time or summer job, and they're more likely to have had therapy as teens. So again, an interesting dynamic has shifted where the communities that we do have, or the places in which like we are interacting with people the most, have expanded. And so to have the statement that they didn't hang out with other teens as much, it does end up causing probably a little bit of confusion. It's like, well, why wouldn't you? Like, you go to school and you would have clubs, but it all goes back to we are struggling to find our communities of people that we can readily and easily hang out with, especially when instances of like, if your family is working full time, then it may be about how am I going to get to said friend's house or communicate with them easily. That's not a problem, but then it's when am I going to see them to do something in person? Because just in general, we like being able to do things with people no matter what. So it's a big change that has occurred in how we're just interacting with people as a whole. And continuing on a little bit further into the article, there's still this type of, where did it go? And just overall, there's still just this argument for the title of this video, we need friends and not coworkers. And so this ties back into the fact that we can't rely on our jobs to meet every need. That's something that I believe. But going back to the article, it talks about how not quite half of Gen Z adults worry at least sometimes that they don't have enough friends. That's a concern not nearly as prevalent in some previous generations, and one that's more likely to concern young women than young men. 47% of young men compared to 41% of young women in Gen Z. And so the author goes on to say that Gen Z is different compared to other generations at the same age. The idea that Gen Z is quote unquote not different, or was the not generation, was kind of born out of the study. And for a lot of things, they were just less involved. There was less opportunity, or due to the pandemic and other reasons, there was just less chances for us to truly try or get into some of the things that previous generations had access to. Like the best example I had is the idea of prom, where the article talks a little bit about that too, where it's like, yeah, that was kind of like a key cornerstone young adult life thing that happened. Like you went to like your junior or senior prom and you transitioned then from that into university. And in some instances it was like, oh, we didn't get a prom, actually didn't get any dances, and then we didn't have a chance to really build the social circles outside of our normal school because we were all online all the time, or having to do like in-person or virtual classes rather than in person. And then we transitioned into work or into a university, which was also online, and we just lost the community. And that's something that we have to be intentional about in repairing, so that we were not looking to our jobs to be the only sole source of community for us. And I will say, this does bring up an argument for religion. And the reason I say it's an argument for it is in this article by, why do I forget the American Enterprise Institute. So, perspective, why even secular people should worry about Gen Z's lack of faith. And so, according to a Pew Research study on Gen Z, we are reportedly the generation's least religious group, or the nation's least religious generation, with about a third having no religion, which is about the same proportion as millennials. But it's still a little bit more than millennials themselves. And that's a little bit of, I think, the extra piece where this conversation about community comes into play here. So churches growing up for probably a lot of our older cohorts, so Gen X, baby boomers, was a lot more of a foundational piece of their upbringing. It was a lot more foundational to the communities that they had or the things that they did, because it's something that you went to. It's where you foster community outside of your job. It's where you fostered friendship and commonality with people, even if you didn't interact with them, throughout the rest of the week. Or maybe you did, because you were able to foster, again, this sense of community, friendship, and support. And obviously, it's been dropping in attendance, and I would venture to say that also some poor experiences with religion have steered people away from it, because even continuing through the article itself, this is another article, actually. So if you're listening to us, it is by the American Survey Center, and this is called Generation Z and the Future of Faith in America. But it goes over the same fact that for the least religious generation, so more than 1/3, about 34% of us are religiously unaffiliated, and there is that generational divide in formative religious experiences. And so for Gen Z, or millennials and Gen Z, are less likely to report attending worship services growing up. Less than half of millennials, 45%, and then 40% of Gen Z say that they attend church weekly. And this, again, I think just goes into the level of community that we can build, or that we are missing the chance of building by not being able to say, hey, this is my group, this is the people that I want to go to, or a people that I want to be around. Because I will say, and I mentioned this in the past, that I identify as Christian, and whether you do or not, that is perfectly okay. But the reason I'm saying this is an argument for religion in terms of struggling to find community is we want to have people that we know support us, people that we know are there for us. And this is one way in which going to church has, helped me for that. But I know it's helped other people for it too. But this is why I said earlier that some people have had poor experiences with religion growing up. Maybe they were in a religiously abusive household. Maybe they were in a religiously stale household. Or maybe they even went to a church that was so toxic and so backwards thinking that with the changes of the world occurring, they decided this is not something that I want to be involved in, because it's not looking towards what the future looked like. It's only looking towards the past type of ideology. And I'm not going to deny that that is a potential risk that people have probably incurred or encountered at some point in their life if they have chosen to walk away from their faith, or if they've chosen to not really ever fully engage with it. But that is where I still think the benefits will outweigh the risk. So the community that you can find, the friendships you can foster, and the people that can support you in just the various chapters of your life will be so beneficial. And I will also bring this back to Simon Sinek as well, as I mentioned earlier, for a show a bit of optimism. He talked about the loss of the bowling league, which sounds a little odd, but let me continue. Life outside of work used to be filled with groups and hobbies that you could do with these people, whether they were your actual coworkers or people that were just truly enamored with the project or with the event itself. And so you could find community outside of your job. And you can still find it in today's world. It's just less pronounced because it is almost like jumping over a couple extra hurdles to find it to begin with. It's not as simple as, hey, here is, or it's still as simple as, hey, here's a group that meets up. But then it's also then a matter of like, okay, who's going to show up? Is it going to be quote unquote worth my time? Is it going to be quote unquote worth my energy? But this is something that you would probably hear from different YouTubers or different content creators as they say they move from city to city, and maybe like they uproot their whole life to move to one new place for opportunities. And they go into it thinking, how am I going to make friends? And that's the idea of like, they still have to find these groups that share an interest, whether that's going to like a martial arts class twice a week or 3 times a week, but consistently, or maybe that's going to a dance class or a dance group or a board game club, whatever it is. You have to find people that share your interest. And by doing so consistently, by continuing to interact with them, you are building up that social capital to be able to transition into friendships and transition into a social network and a community. And it only takes a couple of interactions to be an acquaintance and a couple more interactions to be a friend, to where you can say, hey, let's go out to coffee. I would like to get a chance to know you more and build a friendship. It feels awkward at times, but it is truly a key cornerstone in being able to combat loneliness and lack of community by trying to find your own quote unquote bowling league and getting really involved in it. But this again goes to show that whether it is due to the loneliness endemic that we suffer from, whether it's due to childhood loneliness or divides from our family or just the overall changes of and social isolation that we went through, there is a big burden that we place on our jobs instead now because of the lack of support and friendships that we have developed. So to really combat this, we are looking for places that align with our values to provide meaning, to provide social circles and friendships, and to provide fulfillment and learning. And this isn't impossible, as I mentioned earlier, but to ask all that of jobs is a big ask. It can burden the companies that we're looking at, which sounds a bit odd to say, especially when you think, oh, well, it's a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Why shouldn't they be able to provide this? But it goes to show that, as I mentioned in last week's episode for that CNBC Make It video, it only goes so far that a job can provide for our every single need. There has to be a point in which we ourselves are going into the world to try and do something more with building a community of our own, to make friends of our own and not just have coworkers in our lives. So let's see here. So even if we're asking a lot of our jobs, let's move on to segment 3, transformation, and I'll tell you the secret about what we can do about it. Obviously, your job will not meet all of your needs, not right out the gate anyways, but they can be adjusted to meet them a little bit better. But it does require a lot of work and effort on our side too. That's the big secret here. But let me pull up a Google Doc and I'll just write out for you what I'm thinking as we go through this. So I don't believe that they should meet all of our needs. So let me type that out if you're watching this. So our jobs, they shouldn't meet all of our needs. Because we are multifaceted people, we have distinct needs that honestly, I will say that not all jobs can really impact positively. We have to be able to find that outside of work. This is why you need friends, not coworkers. And obviously you can be friends with your coworkers, and I'm not saying that that's impossible, and I really want to emphasize that I'm not saying that's impossible, but I am saying that we still need more than just that. But they shouldn't meet all of our needs right out the gate. And that's just from us coming into the role to fill a position. And then from there, it's up to us and the company to kind of work together to find that middle ground. So some of the things that people will do and that companies will recommend, because it is such a good way of meeting like-minded people, is volunteering. So volunteering is something that companies love to get behind because it does good in the community, it helps people out, and you also, again, find people who are like-minded because they are either getting involved with a cause that you both are interested in, or they are trying and showing up consistently for different events and drives, and it shows that community and that mindset that you would be able to get involved with pretty easily if this is something that you are making intentional steps toward. And so we can find a source of community by volunteering because, again, it's all about proximity and it's all about finding like-minded people and consistent interactions with them. And then the next piece that comes in is learning and development. Now, companies want people to continue to develop, learn, and grow. Like, that is actually something that they are very, very happy to do, because like, oh, if you are continuing to grow with us, fantastic. If you are taking on education that is related to your current job or your career path, sometimes they can even support that. Like for myself personally, because the company I just got hired on with, they can pay for my college education. But the caveat there is it has to be related to my job or career path. Like if I wanted, like I do a lot of invoicing and accounting. So if I were to take a accounting class and go back and get like a bachelor's of accounting, I could do that. Or I could even do, hopefully, my master's of business administration, get my master's, because I would want to lead the team at some point in the future. And that would be a way of continuing my education for the purpose of developing with the company too. And so it's essentially killing two birds with one stone here. But that again lends opportunities to community and group, because I'll be with people that are doing the same exact thing. And that is an opportunity that Gen Z is looking for, and a lot of people are looking for. And so companies empower us to do more learning, and that is a good thing, but it has to be something that you kind of read in between the lines of like, okay, what is the catches? What are the caveats here for actively taking part in this? But learning and development is something that you can do both on your own time or on company time, technically, at times. But it's so important that we do pursue it, because if we are being intentional about learning and development, we can continue to find people who want to also grow with us. And the other piece here is there is mission-based work. You have to ask yourself, is what I'm doing fulfilling some type of mission-based work, or is it honestly just work? So we want work that is meaningful to us, that is impacting our lives in a positive manner. And sometimes jobs just simply aren't designed for that. But I want to emphasize here, it may not be designed like that for you. Someone else may actually think that that job that is feeling like it's a slog for you, you're just cogging the machine, for them it may actually be what they're looking for. And that's okay, because again, you are going to be very different than everyone else around you. Everyone has their own unique circumstances, their own unique take on what they need. So it's just something that you want to be aware of. And we need to find ways of serving others outside of our jobs and outside of our job capacity. So this again comes up the idea of volunteering or just getting involved within your local community in some capacity. Because finding mission-based work, or maybe doing like 80,000 hours and going to their job board and seeing like what is some of like these huge social or these huge global issues that I want to help tackle and fix and improve. It's a way you can do that, but also you can start small and make just one small step of progress and just do something that is outside your job, whether that is actually like outside your job responsibilities or truly after you clock out, you get involved and you help serve others, because that will help you find more people that want to do the same thing. And again, it's all about finding ways of getting involved and having interactions to begin with. And now, as I said previously, yes, you can be friends with your coworkers. I'm just typing this out here. I don't want you to feel like just because you're working with people that you aren't allowed to be friends with them. The important part is that for any job that you go to, you truly want to enjoy your coworkers, because again, if you're going to spend more time with them than just about anyone else, it's vital that you actively like your coworkers. But you still need deep friendships that are fostered outside of work, whether that is, a couple of coworkers that you're super close with that you go outside of work and do things with and get really involved with together. That's fantastic. Or it is trying to find other ways of finding people that share interests, hobbies, and commonalities that will help you know that, okay, I don't just have my work friends, or my coworkers aren't just my best friends. I have other people and other social circles that I can run with because I'm fostering deep relationships with them too. And that is why it is, like I said, it feels like a lot that you can put on a job, whether you intend to or not, because they can't meet all of our needs right out the gate. And in some circumstances, they can't meet all of our needs, period. So you have to be looking for opportunities and ways of finding community, and then being intentional about showing up, putting in your own effort, because if you don't put in your own effort, you're going to have a harder time making sure that you are ending up with friends and not just coworkers. So my closing question for you guys then is, has your job personally met all of your needs? And if so, tell me how in the comments below. And if you've used my secret before and helped adjust your job to meet your needs, also let me know how you were able to make that happen for you. And I do, again, think that it's possible that a job can meet all of our needs. However, I don't expect every job to be ideal in that circumstance of being able to meet them right out the gate. I just don't. But because work sometimes is just work, that's why the idea of work-life balance is so important. Because you have to have a life outside of work to foster friendships and relationships. And if you dedicate too much time to work, then you will just end up with, at some point, coworkers and not friends, even if you are on friendly terms with all your coworkers. Because you have to remember that with any job, any point in your career, you work to live, you don't live to work. And if you are truly in your dream field, your dream career, your dream job, and it's meeting all those needs, then good on you. Share in the comments below how you got there and how we're going to be able to do that ourselves as well. Because for those of us in Gen Z trying to foster good relationships, trying to foster good community that we can rely on, it's something that we lack. There can be a lack of that for us. And the best thing that we can do is help each other get involved, find friendships, and be supportive. So keeping everything simple, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you like this video and subscribe to our podcast channel. If you are listening to us on a podcast app, make sure you leave us a rating. It helps the show so much and allows other people to discover us as well. I hope you have an amazing day, you amazing people, and go out there and do great things. I'll see you on the next episode.